Hello and welcome to Media Monitor on the SABC News Channel, independent and impartial. Now, this is where we take a look inside the world of media, analysing the trends, the issues and the reporting of Southern Week's top stories. I'm Peter Ndoro and this is what's coming up on the show. We'll be taking a look at the spat between veteran journalist Sam Mukokele and his former employer, Bloomberg, who took the journalist to task for his posts on social media. We'll also give you an update on the murdered journalist Jamal Khashoggi as calls continue to mount for his murder last October. Regular features, our international editor today comes all the way from Tanzania and will be telling us what's in the newspapers in this East African country. And of course, we'll be taking you back into history a little later on the show. Don't forget, you can also engage with us on social media and you can use the hashtag SABC Media Monitor. We'd love to hear from you, just to share your thoughts about what you see on the program and also what you'd like to see on the program. But before we unpack these stories, let's first take a look at what's on the front pages of your Sunday newspapers this morning. And we start with the Sunday Times. And their main story is about how Public Works and Infrastructure Minister Patricia de Lille is cracking the whip on dodgy practices at Public Works. It appears that crime syndicates working with corrupt Public Works officials are fleecing government of millions of rand through the hijacking and illegal rental and sale of state-owned buildings and land. There's also a powerful picture there of Grace Mugabe at her husband's funeral in Zimbabwe yesterday. The City Press is leading with a story about how President Cyril Ramaphosa is being taken to task for reversing the promotions of senior prosecutors who were given new jobs in the dying days of former President Jacob Zuma's tenure. One of the lawyers is taking legal action, saying that he is a victim of ANC factional battles. The Sunday Independent headline points to calls by the Department of Correctional Services to have fewer criminals sent to jail. The prisons are packed, and so the department is saying that inmates should be given parole and those convicted of lesser crimes should be given correctional supervision instead. However, the police want lengthier sentences, saying that knowing that prison conditions are unpleasant may actually act as a deterrent. The Sunday Tribune is reporting that the power utility Eskom has decided to take a hard line with defaulting municipalities, vowing to switch off their lights if they fail to pay their debts. This, the paper says, would have far-reaching consequences to residents and businesses. The Sunday World is leading with a story that sees Fikile Mbalula being brought into the investigation regarding the murder of prominent billionaire businessman Wandile Bozwana. The paper is reporting that the Transport Minister has been identified as one of the people that will be questioned alongside former Premier Supra Mahumapelo. We'll have a little bit more on that because one of our guest editors is in studio. The Weekend Argus on Sunday's top story is about what appears to be students being at odds over funds used for President Ramaphosa's ANC leadership campaign CR17. The paper says that a student leader who was suspended for benefiting from that CR17 funding is claiming that the student organization SASCO misrepresented the facts in a bid to discredit him and get rid of him as its president. So that's a look at the papers, but let's also see what's happening on social media, because this is what's trending. A lot of people, this is the only news that they have. And the top 5 trends, and I've got to say this was a while ago, this has since changed, but when we checked, this was the story. 5th Rick Jade wedding. I think Sobizi got married over the weekend and that was a big thing. And the top trend is this one. Errol Spence, a short while ago, and I even watched the fight. If you woke up early, this was the unification fight of Errol Spence and another character called Parker, and this was to unify the welterweight boxing championship. So Errol Spence now is unbeaten, I think after 26 fights, no losses. I think 21 of them are by knockout. He actually had Parker on the floor at one stage, Porter on the floor at one stage, but didn't knock him out. And so it was a split decision, but in the end, Errol Spence is now the undisputed welterweight champion of the world. And it reminds me back in the day when people like Sugar Ray Leonard and Tommy Hearns used to fight. So this division certainly it was a great fight to watch, I've got to say. So that's a top trend on social media at the minute. Okay, so there's so much to get through on the show this morning, and helping us make sense of these stories are my guest editors. Voice of Wits station manager Shwe Ku and Sunday World editor Makudu Safara. To both of you, welcome. Give us a wave.
Hi, thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us. And we'll be chatting to them shortly. All right, so our first story, journalist Sam Mukokeli is taking his former employer Bloomberg to the CCMA after warnings from the company regarding his social media activity. Now, the journalist has been at loggerheads with the media company since it instituted disciplinary processes against him in 2018, noting that Mukokeli's social media posts had violated its social media policy. All right, very interesting this, and all of us, I guess, have to be mindful of A, who we work for, and B, when do tweets become private and when should they be reflective of the organization that you work for. So to help us discuss this, let's first take a look at the tweet that actually got Sam Mukokeli into trouble in the first instance. And this is what he said. And this is it. It says, Naile walk. And so the story goes that he tweeted this, and Bloomberg said that what he was actually saying by this was that the communications minister, Stella Ndabeni, was just about to be made communications minister, and that he tweeted it first on social media on his Twitter account instead of using a Bloomberg account and saying that the communications minister will be Stella Ndabeni-Abrahams. He, of course, denied this. All right, so, ladies and gentlemen, when we look at that tweet, Naile Walk, if you don't know the backstory, what does it say?
I'll start in that. So Bloomberg is accusing Mukokeli of having broken the news on Twitter.
Yeah.
But the tweet, Naile Walk, could mean anything.
Yes.
And also what we need to think about here is that an organization will have social media policies to protect itself. And us as media practitioners, we don't necessarily have any protection on our or what we tweet and what we share when it's private and views are of our own. And maybe that's a conversation that media, especially those that are influential positions within the media houses, need to start considering. Because the company would say, you broke the news on Twitter. If you had broken the news on our platform, because remember, Bloomberg also is not just a media house. They do have traders that are using the platform who have a competitive advantage, I'd say, because they have journalists on the ground and would have gotten the story. But if Sam Mukokeli, and we're speculating here, did not have verified facts that this is a real story and it's happening, and he was basing his tweet on a like a report or a rumor that he had, he wouldn't have been able to publish it through the Bloomberg platform. Again, we'll have to consider what are the editorial policies of Bloomberg when a journalist is not sure of a story. And I think there's just a lot happening there. And I'm not sure if it's ground to want to dismiss someone for a company.
It's fascinating. What were your thoughts? Because I saw this and I was gobsmacked, to be honest with you.
Yeah, no. I mean, it just for me proves that if you work for an organization like Bloomberg, you could be dismissed for anything. I mean, you could be dismissed for asking me a question. Because what does Naile walk mean? It just means there's somebody walking, say, stylish way of working.
Do you think that it got lost in translation because the leadership of Bloomberg, white people, and perhaps they didn't quite understand the expression?
No, but even that is unacceptable. Because as an organization, if you see something on a private social media platform of an employee and it is something that you don't understand, the basic thing to do is to ask for information.
Yeah.
You know, they should have asked for information. And you can't say post the fact, I mean, to agree with Shosho here. You can't say post the fact of him speculating that, oh, your speculation proved right, it ought to have been. What if it was wrong?
Yeah.
Would they have wanted to, you know,
Take ownership.
Yeah, take ownership of the
All right.
mistake.
So both of you are in leadership, and you are responsible for your journalists and the people that work for you. Is there a wall where you say, at this point, you cease to be an employee? Because if I tweet something controversial, you're going to be the first to say, we had nothing to do with this. Let's start with you this time.
Okay. That question has been put before the courts in our country. And I see quite a lot of people say, hey, listen, you know, the tweets here don't represent the views of my organization, or a retweet is not endorsement.
Disclaimer.
You know, those things work to a particular point. But the law says that you, as an employee of an organization, whatever you do and whatever you say, to the extent that people associate you with the organization, your tweets are also reflective of the organization. But that said, if you go back to the case, you know, he, in that tweet, didn't say she's going to become the minister. He took a picture of the minister walking and said, "Naile walk." I mean, it's quite absurd. It's
but what if? In fact, you answer that as well, and then I'll ask you the follow-up.
For me, there's no point where you, for example, would cease being an SABC employee. So if you tweet something, I'll still know you as Peter Ndoro from the SABC. And to my point earlier on, companies do have policies, social media policies, to protect themselves. And understanding the business of Bloomberg in that they want to be first on the story and report it, and so that the people that are using their Bloomberg terminal and network have access to the story first before everyone else. You'll see that breaking news is a huge currency for them. What I am trying to understand is how Bloomberg read the Naile walk as this is definitive, he knows the story and it's factual, therefore he's tweeting it. And I'd like to give Sam Kokeli benefit of doubt. I mean, he's an experienced journalist and a senior, seasoned editor. Also, if he knew for a fact that the communications minister, Stella Ndabeni, was going to become communications minister, he would have been able to use the channels of the institution he worked for and had gone right ahead to post it there, because he would understand that this is what the business is in business for. So for me, when I saw the tweet, and this is in 2018, when Naile walk was a thing, you know, like you could just be, it was a catchphrase for everyone. So I absolutely want to give him benefit of doubt, and I appreciate that he's taken the employer to the what do you call
CCCMA?
Yes, because we want to see in the end what's going to happen. And he does raise a few questions. If you look through that story, that the company is Lily White at top management, which goes back to Makuru's point, Hore. If you are in South Africa and there's a tweet, Naile walk, would you not have gone and asked to get context if you didn't understand? So if the management didn't get it, maybe his point of the management not reflecting what we are in, or society we in South Africa, might just be one of the challenges.
So asking both of you, is there a time that I can be a private citizen, or because I work for the SABC, I'm SABC Nomaganjan when people look at my tweets?
For me, personally, I'd say, and also as someone who works in an organization, I'll always see you as someone who works in the SABC.
So that's this is the choice I've made by working here. I've got no private life.
Yes, and I'd urge everybody that works for an organization and is using any of the social media platforms, familiarize yourself with the policies of the organization so that you know you can't defend yourself with this is a personal tweet. Retweet is not an endorsement.
Okay.
If your company says a retweet is an endorsement, then you have to take that into consideration.
So the other issue that came up for him is that he shared a post where he commented Tiklo Kafransman. And this was to do with the ANC Pulemabe being accused of sexual harassment by his PA. Bloomberg said that this was an opinion that he was expressing by writing that. Your thoughts?
Yeah, you know, as members of the media, we have opinions that we express from time to time. And so what if it's an opinion that he expressed? So if I sit on a Saturday, as I did yesterday, and I'm editing the paper, we are preparing for production, and there are claims that come through, and I say, you know. So what? You know, he didn't say it means Pulemabe is definitely guilty.
Yes.
In other words, he didn't give them the grounds to assume that he has already prejudged Pulemabe. It's just an exclamation, it's just an expression that says, wow, whatever, you know. And perhaps to his point that the organization is lily white, doesn't understand the language, and a number of his tweets are in local languages. Perhaps that created or precipitated confusion within the organization. But as I said earlier, even that, I mean, it's not an excuse to use to get rid of him. And I suppose that said, the questions still need to be asked, and I suppose through the formal legal processes, the answer will come through. Why was it that Bloomberg found it so necessary to want to get Sam Kokeli out of the organization within this short period of time? Because if you look at the DCs that he went through, it's quite quick succession. It was almost like, and I speculate, a team of people sat down and said, okay, here, this is, you know, one charge, this is another, it will follow this one.
So you're saying it was a witch hunt, basically?
Yeah, on the surface, it looks like it was just an attempt to get him out of the organization, because these tweets, from where I sit,
are not
as a media manager, you know, they are not grounds to fire anybody.
All right, so perhaps finally, again, Peter Ndoro, SABC, does that mean I'm not entitled to an opinion on anything?
I think that's a fair question to ask. And in the case of Sam Kokeli, we need to ask Bloomberg, are they saying that their journalists have no opinions to share on any platforms outside the parameters they've set for the business? And I think with the SABC, you are allowed to have an opinion, and other organizations, you are allowed to have an opinion. But we don't know whether at Bloomberg, you can't share an opinion, or you can't make reference to a story that's running, lest there's some inference that you are commentating on what was published, or there are comments there. So it's a very difficult place to be in.
Okay.
It would be very difficult to see why they would not allow any journalist. In fact, journalists would not require permission from an organization to have views, because that right is contained in the constitution of our country. If they had any policies that said anything to the contrary,
it would be problematic.
Yeah.
All right, interesting. Well, we'll see how it plays out, but certainly no love lost between Kokeli and Bloomberg at this stage. All right, we'll leave that there for the time being, and we are going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll have more for you on Media Monitor. Stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching Media Monitor on the SABC News Channel, independent and impartial. Now, let's take you back to some stories that played through during the course of this week. A disturbing situation near the Haitian Parliament building in the nation's capital, Port-au-Prince, unfolded where Senator Jean-Marie Ralph Fetière pulled out a gun and started shooting up in the air on Monday as protesters surrounded his pickup truck. A journalist for Associated Press and a security guard were reportedly hit by the gunfire. Fetière defended his actions as self-defense, the local media reported. All right, so those are the images of the shooting incident that took place, shooting a journalist there. Now, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia says that he bears responsibility for the murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi because it, quote, happened under my watch. Mohammed bin Salman made the comments in a PBS documentary that will be broadcast next week. Now, the kingdom's de facto ruler has not spoken publicly about the killing of the Washington Post columnist inside the Saudi consulate in Istanbul last year. The CIA and some Western governments have said that he ordered it. All right, so it's quite scary that journalists get caught up in these things. The Khashoggi story, I think, it was very, very alarming given that state agents were flown, to, I think it was Turkey, to take him out, essentially. Crown Prince now speaking for the very first time. And it just makes you wonder, over the years, it's just that now social media makes it harder to hide things. How many people have been summarily dealt with by state organs?
I think when you look at the story, and again, we want to watch that full documentary and see. It's good for the Crown Prince to say, well, it was under my watch, I was leading. And what we've seen with the story is that the state agents couldn't have just flown there and, as you say, dealt with Khashoggi. There would have been some very decisions would have been made at a very high level. To his level high, that's what we need to know. And that needs to be investigated, and he needs to take responsibility. I think when he came in, the current Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, is that he's become almost like a sweetheart, especially to the West, someone who's all for media freedom and someone who's all for democracy. And so this is one of the issues that would be very serious against him and what he has been perceived to be. So it's really serious also to think about it. If not Khashoggi, are there other journalists who would have lost their lives, who would have been brutally killed? I don't know if you saw the video of how Khashoggi's body was dismembered. And then the remains have still not been found. So this is a serious issue, and it speaks to us as media practitioners in the world to say we need to do something. This cannot happen.
So the Crown Prince taking responsibility, but not really.
Yeah.
I mean, I smile, but I'm not smiling. You know, because this is quite a terrible thing that has happened, and I am saddened even by this announcement that he says, I am taking responsibility because I'm the person who was in charge. That's a problem, because he's saying, even though I might have not known anything, we must just be happy with the fact that he's somewhat assuming some responsibility that's not going to lead to any form of justice, and that is a problem. So I'm saying, if indeed he's the person who was in charge, right? He has the power and authority and the access to investigative bodies and the people who matter, who he must instruct, he must work with, And in the same way that Khashoggi was so brutally murdered, the people who did that must be hunted down. The might and the power of his state and his connections with Turkey and other regional organizations, they must do everything possible to get to the people. Why would they be in charge in an environment where somebody like Khashoggi is killed so brutally? And years later, we sit here, we wonder where parts of his body are, where the people who committed this heinous crime are, and why are they not being held accountable for this?
So the other story, the Haitian one, I mean, this is cowboy stuff, isn't it? Shooting guns in the air and somebody gets injured. And I want to bring it home, actually, because news has just come out that 3 JMPD officers who were caught in the middle of chasing gangsters. Journalist Ndoro was killed. They've now been acquitted. So it's a difficult case, a challenging one, and I just wonder, they said that the JMPD officials weren't wholly truthful on what happened, but what does one do when you're shooting against at gangsters and a journalist gets caught in the crossfire?
I think it's a very difficult one, Peter. And if we look at what happened there in Haiti again, and you saw images earlier on of the senator with the gun up in the air, I don't know if he can claim as an elected leader, he can claim self-defense against the very people who elected him in that position, who are in protest. And when we look at the case where there's a police chase and there's a shootout, I think it's such a complex and complicated matter for us to understand. I wouldn't even, because I don't know what our laws say. Can police officers just shoot where there are civilians online who would potentially lose their lives? Because for me, that doesn't sound like it would have been right. If there was a shootout, the police officers would have had to bear the responsibility of ensuring that the civilians around are safe. So it's very complex, I think, and very difficult. But I think people who are in positions of influence and power have no grounds to be shooting and putting in the line of danger the lives of civilians, whether it's in a protest or it's just in a public space. It just makes absolutely no sense.
So the senator, there's no exonerating him, but these JMPD officials that killed God knows Ndoro, it was a car hijacking that they were responding to in Florida, in Johannesburg. And he got shot in the middle of this.
Yeah, I mean, the Shosha is quite correct to say that each case will come with a level of its own complexities to navigate. But obviously, I mean, law enforcement officers are people who are trained to understand that you are not supposed to discharge weapons in environments where people who are innocent and people who are not involved in the thing that you're trying to stop get caught in the crossfires and lose their lives as a consequence. But that said, we also know that it's not everything that people get trained in, like the police. If they trained you, this is when you shoot, this is when you don't shoot. The training manuals may not come with all manner of environments you might encounter. Some people must respond on the moment, but all we appeal for, especially as journalists who get caught up in these environments where we need to go into in order to report so society can have an idea closest to the truth about what is happening, that the police, especially the police, must act with the utmost circumspection and prudence in those environments. But we understand that they're difficult, but we also think that if you look into our context and our history and our shoot to kill and those kind of environments that we come out of, also help precipitate an environment where some cops might feel, you know, it's okay to discharge a gun, even though such a decision is taken in a very reckless manner.
All right, so case by case, JMPD officers acquitted here in South Africa. The senator should be brought to book, and perhaps the apology by the Crown Prince, Saudi Arabia, perhaps not as sincere as it should be.
Not good enough.
All right, okay, we'll leave that for the time being, and it's time now for us actually to go to our news archives, and this is one of my favorite features on the show. And today we take you back to 1996, and South Africa had been back in international cricket for about 5 years, and they took part in the Kenya Cricket Association Centenary Tournament. I think it's also called the Samir Cup in Nairobi, with Kenya, Sri Lanka and Pakistan. Well, on this day, 23 years ago, they took on the mighty Pakistan, and this is how the SABC News told the story.
The cricket team has won its first international of the season. They beat Pakistan by 62 runs in the quadrangular tournament in Kenya this afternoon. Put in to bat, South Africa scored 321 for 8, thanks to centuries by Daryl Cullinan and Jonty Rhodes. Pakistan were dismissed for 259 in the 43rd over.
Waqar Younis and Wasim Akram exploited the cloudy conditions and the dampness of the pitch early on. Andrew Hudson, who scored 2, Gary Kirsten with 15 and Pat Simcox were all beaten by swing and movement, and South Africa were in a spot of bother on 38 for 3 in the 9th over. But Cullinan, South Africa's most consistent performer on international level last season, and the man to have in a crisis, Jonty Rhodes, rescued their team. Their 232-run partnership is a new South African record. Both batsmen also surpassed their previous high scores in one-day internationals. Rhodes scored his maiden limited over century. His 121 along with Cullinan's 124 enabled South Africa to reach 321 for 8 of their allotted 50 overs. If the Pakistanis thought they would be able to steal the show in their innings, they were wrong. Rhodes jumped into the limelight again in the first over to send Saeed Anwar on his way with just 1 run to his name. And although they maintained a brisk run rate throughout their innings, it was Donald's second spell, in which he took 3 wickets, that swung the match in South Africa's favour. The wicket of Ijaz Ahmed, who scored 88 of 61 deliveries, was vital. Fonnie de Villiers clinched the match when he bowled Waqar for 28 for a 62-run victory.
Ah, legendary names there. My goodness, that takes us back in time, especially if you've got grey hair like me. And it was so sad that they never quite got over the line in terms of winning the World Cup. But people like Jonty Rhodes, of course, recognised at that time as perhaps one of the best fielders in the world at the time. But they just couldn't get over the line, as I said, in terms of World Cups. All right, so don't forget, if you ever want us to bring you some story back in the day, please communicate with us, #SABC Media Monitor. We'd love to hear from you, and we'll go into the archives and bring back some of that history with exclusive footage that nobody else has except SABC News. All right, we take a quick break, and when we come back, we start looking at the newspapers, both internationally and here at home. Welcome back. Now we start taking a look at what's in the newspapers this weekend. But first we take you to East Africa for our regular international editor feature. And we cross now via Skype to Tanzania, where we are joined by award-winning journalist Richard Mugamba. Thanks so much for joining us. Habari yako?
Habari yangu nzuri, Dumela.
Aiwa, Tiripo. We'll speak all the languages now. All right, so let's go.
We Africans.
Yes. Take us through your newspapers. I believe the Citizen has got an interesting article about the former Bank of Tanzania governor.
Yeah, that's what the Sunday Citizen has splashed today. This guy, the Bank of Tanzania, just for the sake of our viewers, is equivalent to the Federal Reserve Bank of South Africa. So Professor Ben Ndoro, one of the best economists that this country has ever produced, has been appointed by the South African president to serve in the advisory council. That's the big story for the Citizen when I look at their website this morning.
All right, and then what's this ban? What's this ban on online televisions?
Yeah, there are online television. There is what we call TCRA, which is the equivalent of ICASA in South Africa. That's the regulator who regulates what you broadcast online, regulate internet, mobile phone, landline communication, television, everything. That's the watchdog. So they have just penalized and suspended some licenses for some online TVs for what they call is breach of the regulation. Remember, as journalists, I always remind myself that we are not operating above the law. So that's another big story, considering that your program is called the Media Monitor. There is a ban or a suspension here in Tanzania which has taken place.
So I would imagine this is just for entities that are registered and operate from Tanzania, but they have no control over anybody broadcasting from other parts of the world.
Yeah.
Hello, Mr. Mgamba.
You are not staying good book letter. Yeah. If they have banned you, I think the most. Yes, I can hear you. I can hear you there. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. All right. So
Peter, are you there?
Yes, we're still here. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you very well.
All right. Okay. Well, let's move quickly along. Uganda pipeline deadlock. What's that about, and why does this involve the Chinese?
This was supposed to be the biggest story in the Southern Africa if it was well executed. Remember, Uganda has discovered oil, and they were planning to ship their oil via Tanzania. So there was a pipeline, oil pipeline that would have $1. Hello, Peter.
Yes. Carry on.
Hello.
Carry on.
Yeah. So this is a project that would have cost $3.5 billion for Uganda, building an oil pipeline of 1,444 kilometers from Hoima in Uganda to the port in Tanzania called Tanga. That's in the coast region. But the investors pulled out because of what they cited. The government of Uganda couldn't agree with them in the issue of tax amounting to $85 million. So in a simple words, is you sacrifice 3.5 billion investment because you wanted to get $85 million. Some critics have called it bad decision by the Ugandan government, but as we are talking now, even the president of Tanzania just a month ago expressed his biggest concern about the failure by Uganda to secure that deal on time. So that's another big story that has been splashed by the Citizen here in Tanzania.
All right, and then finally, interesting, no ID, no job in government.
Yep, we have what we call BVR. This is the biometric registration. So if you don't have that national ID, you cannot work for government. That's now a policy. For those who want to work for government, make sure you have that ID, and the process to get it is a bit complicated. The idea behind this is to make sure that no foreign nationals who have entered this country illegally, whether when they were at their young age or whatever, can then work for government. So for you to work for government, once you have the national ID, it means you are an authentic citizen of the United Republic of Tanzania. So you work for the government. Did you get me there, Peter?
Yes, I did indeed. Moving away from the papers, I'm always curious to know the state of affairs in terms of how journalists are allowed to operate and work. What is the state of affairs in Tanzania? Hello, can you hear me still?
Yes, I can hear you.
All right, so what is the state of affairs in terms of being able to do your job as a journalist? Is there a lot of freedom, or does one feel pressure from authorities from time to time?
I always say this, Peter. Freedoms of the press comes with the sense of accountability and responsibility. These are very important things. We may argue, people will argue. Tanzania's got a number of challenges when it comes to press freedom, but I still believe there is a room to practice good journalism. If journalists in South Africa manage to practice journalism during the apartheid regime, and then you can practice journalism, provided you just know how you juggle with the laws of the day. Otherwise, there is no freedom without limitation. There is no freedom without its challenges. What I see here, there are challenges. I don't see threats, I see challenges. I have to be very clear on this. But I think I've been in this country practicing for almost 20-something years. Now I've taken a very long sabbatical leave to do other works. But I can still see a room to do good stories, to practice good journalism. And when I talk about good journalism, remember there is also bad journalism. We may argue, people can defend whatever they defend, but I believe there is a room to practice good journalism in Tanzania, and it is not that bad as always portrayed by the Western media. They portray Tanzania as if we are a failed state, as if we are Somalia, where you can't, if you're a journalist, you can be killed anytime, you can be arrested anytime or tortured anytime. That's not the case.
Okay, thank you so much. We're going to have to leave it there. Looks like we're about to lose the line anyway, but thanks for your insights and taking us through the papers. That was award-winning journalist Richard Mgamba from Tanzania. Well, let's focus on what's happening in the papers here at home. And I'm going to start with you, the editor of the Sunday World, because this headline of yours, Mbalula's Botswana link, is going to shake a few heads today. What is the story here?
No, essentially we published last week claims relating to the former Northwest Premier Supra Mahomapelo and how he's linked to the hitman who killed the businessman. And now we then discovered that the transport minister has been identified by the police as a person of interest in their investigation. And this is because he has been making contacts with some of the people who are implicated in the murder of Botswana. They called him in for questioning. They made an application, we are made to understand, to get access to his records and his movement. I think it's
the minister's movements and records.
Yes, yeah. Minister Mbalula's records, whether on the day of the murder, for example, who on the phone did he communicate with, and what were his whereabouts, when last was he with Botswana, what's the nature of the relationship that he has with Botswana, all those things. So we spoke to our sources, we've looked at certain documentation, we've put questions to the minister to say, you know, Mr. Minister, your name keeps coming up in the murder investigation of Botswana. And we have a few questions for you. We put the questions to him, and he confirmed to us that indeed the police have spoken to him. And that, but then he says, no, listen, in the same way that Supra said last week, that no, listen, there's people who are concocting certain things in order to implicate me and tarnish my name, and that, you know, I didn't do anything wrong, you know, I wasn't involved in the murder, but, you know, we didn't say he's a suspect. We just said that the police have identified him as a person of interest.
To assist with the investigation.
Yeah, to look at quite a number of things around him.
Okay.
And very late yesterday, almost on deadline, his lawyers, after we had spoken to him, his lawyers then called us to say, listen, email addresses, you know, sent us some threatening letters, and so on, parts of which are captured in the paper.
So the lawyers didn't want you to publish?
Essentially, because, you know, they said this is unfair, and that we must take into consideration the fact that the minister is not a suspect in the case, and that you know, should we say anything untoward, there will be legal consequences, and his rights are reserved. but we just thought, there's too much at stake for us not to proceed with the story.
Right.
And it is an interesting thing for us, not only interesting, it's in the public interest that at the point, the police who were investigating the murder of the businessman sat down and said, we are looking at all this manner of people, including this person who previously was the Minister of Police, and then said, let's make a formal application to the court to say we want officially to get access to his records, his SMSs, and those kind of things. It's
Are
it's
you
a massive
happy
story.
with the answers that Transport Minister gave you?
No, I mean there's a things he didn't respond to, and there are certain things that we just pulled back because we wanted to focus more attention on in the future. And his lawyers said other things about, but the time given is not sufficient for him to deal with certain aspects. But I mean he made threats, and I don't want to say we take the threats lightly, but we are taking the claims that are made against him and the process followed by the police to access his information and to question him. We're taking those claims very seriously.
Right. What is he most concerned about? Because as you said, you're not saying he's a suspect. He's just assisting the police with their investigations, partly because of phone calls that he made to people that are linked to this particular case. So what is it that the lawyer said was unfair?
No, I think the lawyers came to us after we had already done an interview with him. And in the interview, he alludes to claims of a political conspiracy, his rivals wanting to deal with him, rogue people in the police crime intelligence who are being used by other politicians, to get at him or things like that. So, these are the claims that he's making.
So he's worried that you're part of a smear campaign.
He feels, those people may want to tarnish his name for political reasons. And we, as an editor, I wouldn't really accept such sweeping statements without evidence. So if there are people who want to get at him, who are these people, what are their motivations, and what evidence is there to back his claims? In the same way that when police say, we questioned the minister, or the minister is a person of interest, we say, show us the evidence. So in the same way that he says, there are people who are trying to smear my name.
Show us.
As an editor, I need to say to him, where's the evidence? Show us.
All right. I'm sure that a lot of people are going to pick up your paper this weekend. What grabbed your attention? Which paper?
So it's the City Press.
City Press.
And for me, I think the story, prosecutors take the fight to Cyril. And this relates to those prosecutors who were promoted and were just getting ready to start their new position. So, and this was right at the eve, as the story says, of former President Jacob Zuma leaving the office and the former NDP Sean Abrahams leaving. Now, and for me, I've got a question here in that, would there be merit in their promotion? So I appreciate that the timing might maybe bring some questions into their promotion, but some are saying they've been in the job system for over 20 years, and they feel that it was time for them to move
Sean
up.
Abrahams has been a lawyer a long time, and he appointed these people, and I suppose this is where the question marks start to come, that he would appoint these people at that time.
Are we going to say, though, that all the people who were appointed and promoted under Sean Abrahams or under the leadership of former President Jacob Zuma were unfairly promoted and appointed, that does also comes to sound slightly unfair. I think we should definitely look at the merits of each cases, and yes, that should also be considered. And Sean Abrahams made the appointments. Could this be influenced by him and the way he was conducting himself, or some interests? But if the promotions are due, then I think we should be able to say, well deserved, you need to move up, yes.
All right, we're running out of time, but 30 seconds. What's the big story this week coming, do you think? I mean, we've got the ANC, NEC, of course, tomorrow. How did they deal with Tito Mbowene's document? And also that secret witness at the State Capture Commission will be on the stand again. What else do you think we should be looking at?
There's the medium-term budget policy statement that the finance minister will be busy preparing, and I think the key thing for me is the state of joblessness and the waning Ramaphoria, and the document that the finance minister put out, and to kind of
get people thinking and talking.
Get the economy moving.
Because of time,
once more.
Shweshwe?
I think for me, I want to see more stories, and I want to hear this new economic committee that's been appointed by the president. I want to know going forward what's going to happen, because we are in a difficult situation, and you talk about unemployment as one of the biggest problems that we have in the country. So I'm absolutely looking forward to see how that story develops in this coming weekend. Of course, that Zondo Commission, the secret witness, we have to look forward to that.
Okay, Shweshwe and Makudu, thank you very much for being great guests as always, and your insights always valuable. Thank you so much indeed.
You're welcome.
And for you at home, thanks very much indeed for watching Media Monitor. We hope that you'll join us again at the same time next week at the same place on the same channel. From me and the rest of the team, have a lovely day and a great week ahead. Stay blessed, everyone. Bye-bye.